When you move into a shared apartment with strangers, you expect awkward small talk, a few boundaries crossed, and the occasional fight about dishes. What you don't expect is obsession, the kind that turns your life into a waking nightmare. It began last September when I transferred to a new university across the state. My old lease had ended, and finding affordable housing near campus was a nightmare. After weeks of scrolling through listings, I found an ad for a 3-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from my classes. The rent was reasonable, utilities included, and the roommates, according to the post, were quiet art students. It sounded perfect. When I first moved in, everything seemed normal. The place was clean, but oddly sterile, like no one actually lived there. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched, and there was a faint chemical smell that I couldn't quite place. My room was the smallest one, but I didn't mind. I just wanted peace. I met one of the roommates, Ivy, that first evening. She was tall, pale, with black hair cut in a sharp bob, and a voice that barely rose above a whisper. She told me she was studying design and spent most of her time in her studio. I barely saw her after that. The other roommate, Tessa, hadn't moved in yet. At least, that's what Ivy said. Days passed quietly. I went to classes, came home, studied, and occasionally heard faint music from Ivy's room, a strange looping melody that sounded like a child's lullaby distorted through static. I figured it was part of her art. The first sign something was off came on my 4th night there. I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of murmuring. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct, a rhythmic, repetitive whisper coming from Ivy's room, punctuated by what sounded like tapping. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity won. I stepped into the hallway and saw a sliver of light under her door. The murmurs stopped for a second, then continued, faster this time. I thought she might be on a call, but the words didn't sound conversational, more like chanting. The next morning, I asked her about it casually. She looked at me blankly, like I'd said something offensive. "You must have been dreaming," she said, and walked away. After that, I started noticing small things. Figures drawn in black ink on sticky notes, placed around the apartment. Wide-eyed creatures with sharp teeth and pointy ears. They looked like some kind of demonic cartoon rabbits. Each one was labeled with different names: Pip, Nuru, Slink, Booba. I thought it was part of a project. Art students did weird stuff all the time, right? Then one evening, while I was making dinner, Ivy came out of her room holding a tiny figure. It was a small plastic toy, maybe 6 inches tall, with glossy black eyes and a crooked grin. Its teeth were jagged, painted in red, and it had the same rabbit-like features as the drawings. She set it on the counter and said softly, "He likes it when people watch him eat." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't even blink. She stared at me for a few seconds, her eyes hollow, before picking the toy back up and walking away. That was the first time I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Over the next week, the toys multiplied. I'd see them in the living room, on the bathroom counter, even on the kitchen shelf beside the salt shaker. Each one had slightly different features, some smiling, some snarling, but they all shared the same grotesque design. I asked Ivy if they were part of a collection, and she said they were Labubu, designer art dolls from an obscure company that only released limited editions. Apparently, fans traded them like currency. That night I searched it up online, and what I found disturbed me. Forums filled with users treating these dolls like living beings. They claimed that each Labubu had a soul that bonded with its owner, and that mistreating or mocking one would bring emotional retaliation. It was ridiculous, but the devotion in those comments unsettled me. Some people wrote about their dolls moving slightly when left alone. Others claimed they whispered names in the dark. I closed the tab, rolled my eyes, and went to bed. But I left my light on. Things escalated when Tessa finally moved in, or rather, when Ivy said she did. I never actually saw Tessa. There were new shoes at the door, a new toothbrush in the bathroom, and an extra mug on the counter, but no person. I assumed she worked late shifts or slept during the day, but one night I woke up again to that whispering sound, this time coming from both Ivy's room and the supposedly empty guest room next to mine. The two voices overlapped, chanting the same word, Labubu, in an eerie synchronized rhythm. I pressed my ear against the wall. I heard soft scratching sounds, like plastic dragging across wood. Something knocked from the other side, twice, then silence. When I confronted Ivy the next morning, she said something that made my skin crawl. Tessa doesn't like when people eavesdrop. She's shy. Then she smiled faintly and went back into her room. That day, I decided to peek inside the guest room while Ivy was gone. The door wasn't locked. The smell hit me first, that same chemical sweetness, stronger now, mixed with something metallic. The blinds were shut, the walls bare except for dozens of Polaroid photos taped in uneven rows. Each one showed a Labubu doll, each in a different position, sitting on the bed, standing on the windowsill, hanging from the doorknob. Some photos had faint smudges around the dolls, like shadows where they shouldn't be. And then I saw the shrine. It was built on a small table against the wall. A semicircle of candles surrounded a glass display case filled with more of those toys. In the center, one Labubu stood taller than the rest, painted all white, with eyes that shimmered faintly under the candlelight. Its teeth were sharper, its grin wider. A plaque beneath it read, "The Listener." I backed away horrified, knocking over one of the Polaroids. And then I noticed the last row of photos weren't of toys. They were of me cooking in the kitchen, me studying in my room, me sleeping. The photos were taken through my window blinds. My stomach dropped. I ran out of the room and packed my things immediately. I didn't care about the deposit. I texted Ivy that I was leaving, no explanation. She didn't reply. But that night when I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Then came the sound of something plastic scraping the floor. I opened the door. Nothing there, just the faint smell of candle wax. But when I turned back toward my bed, my blood froze. Sitting on my pillow was that same white Labubu, the Listener, staring directly at me. I grabbed it, shoved it into a bag, and sprinted out. I threw it into the dumpster behind the building and didn't stop until I reached my car. I drove to a motel 20 minutes away and tried to sleep, but every creak in the room made my heart pound. Around 3 a.m., I heard knocking, 3 slow taps on the door. I froze. Then something slid under the door. It was a Polaroid. I picked it up with trembling hands. The picture was of me standing next to the dumpster, taken just hours earlier. Behind me, blurry but unmistakable, was Ivy, holding the Listener. I called campus security the next morning. They went to the apartment and found Ivy gone. The rooms were stripped bare except for the shrine, still burning with fresh candles. The white Labubu was missing. There was no trace of Tessa, not in student records, not in housing files, nowhere. It was like she never existed. For weeks after, I kept checking my rearview mirror every time I drove home. I started hearing that soft humming, the same lullaby from Ivy's room, even when I was miles away. Once I found a small scratch on my apartment window, shaped like a crooked smile. That was 4 months ago. I've moved cities since then, changed my number, and deleted every photo from that time. But sometimes, I still wake up at night feeling like something is watching me from the corner of the room. Last week, a package arrived at my new address. No return label, no sender information. Inside was a single Polaroid and a note. The photo showed Ivy standing in front of a toy store, smiling. Behind her, lined nicely in the display window, were dozens of Labubu dolls. And right in the center, staring straight at the camera, was the listener. The note read only 2 words, written in red ink. Tessa waits.
When I took the job cataloging antiques for a small-town collector, I didn't expect to find anything unsettling. My degree in art history hadn't exactly prepared me for much beyond dusty archives and quiet museums. So when Mr. Beckett, an old reclusive man who lived on the edge of town, offered me $25 an hour to help him document his private toy collection, I accepted immediately. His house was enormous, but eerily silent. The first floor looked ordinary. Oil paintings, a grand piano, shelves of porcelain figurines, but the basement was something else entirely. That's where his favorites were. The first time he led me down there, the smell hit me first, a mix of cedar and metal, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. The space was huge, lined with glass cases under soft yellow lights. Inside were hundreds of toys, some antique, some modern, all displayed with surgical precision. But what caught my attention was an entire section separated by a velvet curtain. Behind it was the Labubu collection. I had seen the name floating around online. Small designer toys with exaggerated rabbit-like faces, wide eyes, and sharp, cartoonish teeth. But seeing hundreds of them lined up under glass was overwhelming. Each doll had its own label, each with a unique name and release date, some dating back decades. Their painted grins reflected the dim light like something alive. Mr. Beckett's voice was raspy as he told me how he'd spent years finding them. He claimed that no 2 Labubus were ever truly the same, that each one absorbed something from its owner. He said this casually, but the words lingered in my head long after. My task was simple: photograph each figure, note its serial number, and record any distinguishing features. It sounded easy enough, but by the end of my first week, I noticed small changes. The dolls' positions were different. Not dramatically, just enough to make me doubt my memory. A pink one I'd logged on the left shelf was suddenly on the right the next morning. A yellow one that used to face forward now tilted its head. When I asked Mr. Beckett about it, he said they like to keep things interesting, before chuckling softly. I thought he was joking. Then I started hearing things. When I stayed late to finish documentation, I'd hear faint scratching sounds from the shelves, soft, deliberate, like tiny fingernails tapping glass. Once, while zooming in on a photo I'd taken, I noticed something odd. In the reflection of the case, there was movement, a blur near the corner. But when I turned around, the room was empty. The next night, while uploading photos, my computer froze on one image. It was a close-up of a red Labubu with hollow eyes. The longer I stared at it, the more distorted it seemed. The pixels shifted slightly, forming what looked like cracks across its grin. I blinked, and the cracks were gone. I told myself it was fatigue. By the second week, I started dreaming about them. In the dreams, I'd be standing in front of the display cases, and one of the Labubus, always the same one, the red one with the wide grin, would be missing. Then I'd hear something breathing behind me, short and fast, like a child trying not to laugh. I'd wake up drenched in sweat. On the 5th night, I decided to leave early. I shut down the basement lights and went upstairs to grab my bag. But before leaving, I realized I'd forgotten my phone charger downstairs. When I went back to get it, the lights were on again. Every glass case was fogged from the inside. My reflection was warped across dozens of tiny smiling faces. Then I noticed the red Labubu. It wasn't behind glass anymore. It was sitting on the cataloging table facing the door, as if waiting. I froze. I hadn't touched that case all day. I checked the latch. It was locked from the outside. I didn't stay to think about it. I grabbed my things and left. That night, Mr. Beckett called me. His voice was calm, almost soothing, as he said, "If you're going to work with them, you have to treat them with respect." I asked him what he meant, but he only laughed. He said, "They notice when someone doubts them," then hung up. The following day I went back, mostly to quit. But when I arrived, the house was different. The door was unlocked. The piano in the living room played a single note on repeat, like a key stuck down. I called for Mr. Beckett, but no answer. The basement door was open. I told myself not to go down there, but something, curiosity, or maybe fear, pulled me forward. The air grew heavier as I descended. The hum of fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Every glass case door was open now. Hundreds of Labubus were gone. The room looked vandalized, except there were no signs of forced entry. Then I saw it. The velvet curtain in the back had been torn down. Behind it, the far wall had changed. It was covered in photographs, hundreds of Polaroids, all showing different people, smiling, laughing, some asleep, some terrified. And in each one, somewhere in the frame, a Labubu appeared. In a corner, on a shelf, on someone's lap. I recognized some of the faces from newspaper clippings pinned below, all missing persons from different states. In the center of the wall was a new photo. Me, standing in front of the basement cases, taken just yesterday. The red Labubu was sitting on my shoulder in the picture, though I swear it hadn't been there when the photo was taken. Something moved behind me, a faint scuttling sound like dozens of tiny claws scraping the floor. I turned, nothing. The air felt wrong, colder now. The fog from the glass cases began to spread, thickening, rising like breath. Then I saw them. Hundreds of little figures emerging from the shadows, their glossy eyes reflecting the dim light. They weren't walking, they crawled, limbs twitching, mouths open slightly as if panting, their grins stretched unnaturally wide. I ran for the stairs. Behind me, the tapping grew louder, not random, but synchronized, like they were moving in time. I reached the top step and slammed the basement door shut. Something hit the other side immediately, like small fists, one after another. I backed away and grabbed my phone, dialing 911. My hand shook so hard I dropped it. When I picked it up again, the screen was black, just a reflection of my face, and behind me, in the reflection, something moved, a flash of red. The door creaked open by itself. I bolted outside and didn't stop running until I reached the main road. When the police came, I told them what I saw. They searched the house and found the basement empty. No toys, no photos, no velvet curtain. Just bare walls and a faint smell of wax. They told me Mr. Beckett wasn't there either. He'd been missing for days. They thought I was lying, maybe hallucinating from stress. I didn't argue. I just quit and never went back. A month later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single toy, the red Labubu. Its grin looked wider than before, its plastic teeth glistening faintly under the light. There was a tag around its neck. It read, "You finished cataloging us." I threw it out immediately, but the next morning it was sitting on my kitchen counter again, perfectly clean like it had never left. That night I heard tapping under the floorboards, slow, patient, as if something was crawling through the dark just beneath me. I moved out 2 days later. That was 6 months ago. I thought I'd escaped it until last week when I visited a small art gallery downtown. They were hosting an exhibit called Icons of Innocence. I almost turned around when I saw the flyer, but curiosity got the better of me. In the center of the gallery stood a single glass case. Inside it was a familiar red figure, smiling its painted grin, and beside it a placard, "Property of the Beckett Estate." The gallery lights flickered. For a moment I saw my reflection in the glass, and behind me, dozens of tiny shadows, all smiling. That's when I realized something horrifying. Maybe the dolls never belonged to Mr. Beckett after all. Maybe he belonged to them. And maybe now, so do I.
I've always been one of those people who collect strange things. Not stamps or coins. No, I preferred the bizarre. Oddities, vintage toys, and old figurines that looked just a little too human. So when I saw a limited edition Labubu toy on an online auction site, I couldn't resist. The photo showed it sitting under a dim light. Big, glossy eyes, sharp little teeth, and a cracked ear that made it look imperfect. That imperfection made it unique, I thought. The listing said it came from a discontinued series that was never officially sold. I didn't even think twice. I bought it. It arrived 3 days later. The box was ordinary, taped carelessly with brown packaging tape. But the moment I opened it, a strong chemical smell hit me, like burnt plastic mixed with something damp, metallic. The Labubu was wrapped in old newspaper, its paint slightly chipped, eyes reflecting the room light in a way that almost seemed alive. I placed it on my shelf, between my other designer figures. For a while, it looked perfect there, until the first night. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound, a faint tick, tick, tick from somewhere near my desk. My apartment was silent otherwise, so the sound stood out. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it at the shelf. Everything looked normal. I assumed it was the clock or maybe a pipe expanding and went back to sleep. The next morning, I noticed something odd. The Labubu wasn't facing forward anymore. It was turned slightly to the left, its head tilted as if it were watching the window. I laughed it off. Maybe I bumped the shelf. But that night, the ticking came back, louder, slower, almost like footsteps. I tried to ignore it, but around 4 a.m., I heard something fall, a dull thud from the shelf. I jumped out of bed, flipped the light on, and froze. The Labubu was on the floor, standing upright, not lying, not toppled, standing. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I put it back, checked that the shelf was stable, and decided I was overreacting. Maybe it landed that way by coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that its eyes looked different. The pupils seemed a bit larger, the grin slightly wider. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time I woke up not to a sound, but to a presence. That heavy, static feeling when you know something's watching you. The air was cold, almost damp. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I saw it. The faint silhouette of the Labubu, standing on my nightstand, facing me. I didn't move. For almost a minute, I just stared, heart pounding, convinced I was dreaming. Then I turned on the lamp, and it was gone. I searched everywhere. Finally, I found it under the bed, lying on its side. That was the night I decided to get rid of it. The next morning, I packed it in the same box it came in and threw it into the dumpster behind my building. I even watched the garbage truck come later that afternoon. I felt relief. Silly as it sounded, the apartment felt lighter. That night, I slept without interruption for days. But when I woke up, the box was sitting on my kitchen table. It wasn't dirty or dented. It looked as if it had never left the house. The tape was still sealed. My stomach dropped. I opened it with trembling hands. The Labubu stared back at me, same wide grin, same cracked ear, except now there was something dark around its teeth. At first I thought it was dust, but when I wiped it, a faint reddish streak smeared across my fingers. I didn't want to think about what it was. I tried burning it next. I took it to an empty field behind my apartment complex, lit a small bonfire, and tossed it in. The flames rose high, crackling. But the toy didn't melt. It didn't even blacken. Instead, it began to make a faint sound, like air escaping from a balloon, a soft, wet hiss. Then I heard it whisper. Not words, actually, more like a breath, shaped into my name. I ran before the fire even died out. The next few days were a blur. I started seeing things, shadows shaped like tiny figures darting across the room, faint laughter coming from inside the walls, soft ticking at all hours. My neighbors complained that they heard someone talking in my apartment at night, even when I wasn't home. Then the dreams began. Every night, I found myself in a dim room lined with shelves, hundreds of Labubus, all staring at me. In the center of the room was the cracked one, the one I'd bought, except now it was taller, almost human-sized, grinning down at me. Its glass eyes glowed faintly. I'd wake up gasping, the sound of ticking echoing in my ears. I tried everything, salt lines, prayers, even calling a local priest. He told me to get rid of whatever I'd invited, but when I showed him the Labubu, he refused to touch it. He only muttered that some objects aren't meant to be owned. So I locked it in a steel toolbox, sealed it with duct tape, and drove it to a nearby river. I tossed the box into the water and watched it sink. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Until 2 nights later. I was brushing my teeth when I heard a dripping sound, slow, rhythmic, coming from the living room. I turned off the faucet and listened. The sound continued. I followed it, each step heavier than the last. The air smelled faintly of the river, muddy, cold. And there it was. The Labubu sat on the coffee table, dripping wet. Its cracked ear was gone now, replaced with smooth, unbroken plastic. In its lap lay a small photograph of me, sleeping. I dropped everything and ran out of the apartment. I didn't even take my keys. I stayed at a friend's house for 3 nights. When I came back, the photo was gone, but the Labubu was still there, waiting, sitting in the exact center of the room. Now strange things happen every night. Sometimes I wake up with small scratches on my arms, like tiny claws. Sometimes I find muddy footprints on the floor, small, childlike, leading to my bed. Once I woke to find the Labubu on my chest, its cold face inches from mine. I don't sleep much anymore. The ticking never stops. It follows me to work, to the grocery store, even in my car. Last week, I tried to record it, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I set my phone on the desk, facing the Labubu, and left it recording overnight. In the morning, I played it back. At first, there was only silence, then faint movement, ticking, scraping, a soft, wet laugh, then a whisper, clear as day. "Don't leave me again." That was 3 days ago. Today, the Labubu isn't on the shelf anymore. It's gone, vanished completely. I checked every corner, every drawer. The ticking stopped too. I should feel relieved, but I can't, because when I looked at my reflection this morning, something was wrong. My eyes looked wider, my smile sharper, and just for a second, I could have sworn I saw another face faintly superimposed over mine in the mirror, small, with long ears and a painted grin. I haven't left the apartment since. Sometimes I think I hear footsteps just outside my door, light and quick. Sometimes the lights flicker, and for a moment, the shadows on the walls look like ears. If you ever see a cracked Labubu listed online, especially one with a chipped ear, don't buy it. No matter how rare it seems, no matter how much you love collecting, because once it finds a home, it doesn't let go. Not ever.